Hello everyone, welcome to another class discussion here in Professional Education 9. I am Katherine Molato, your presenter for today. In previous discussion, we tackled the understanding, interpreting, and applying the curriculum development. And today, we will continue to understand that curriculum can be evaluated right in the teacher's classroom. Our topic for today is Lesson 5.2, Curriculum Evaluation Through Learning Assessment. The following are the expected learning outcomes to be met at the end of the discussion. First, explain how a curriculum can be evaluated through the assessment of learning outcomes. Second, identify the levels of learning outcomes vis-a-vis level of assessment. Third, match the levels of learning outcomes with the appropriate assessment tools. And lastly, interpret the value of assessment in terms of grades assigned. To start with, let me discuss the Philippine Qualification Framework or PQF. Philippine Qualification Framework or PQF is a reference system of national standards of what qualification one has earned by education and training in the Philippines. This framework specifies what an individual learned in and out of formal schooling. This based on qualification levels and degree of competencies on knowledge, skills, values, application, and degree of independence. A person is deemed qualified if he or she achieved the specific learning outcomes necessary for the academic, work, and community requirements for which an official qualification recognition shall be conferred. Again, this is the Philippine Qualification Framework, and as you can see, it is divided into 8 levels. The first level is to be achieved by grade 12 graduates who can be awarded a National Certificate 1 or NC1 if qualified by TESDA, while the other levels of qualification progress along the educational ladder in the Philippine educational system from grade 12 in basic education to higher education, from baccalaureate to post-baccalaureate to doctoral and postdoctoral. In all 8 levels, the individual are expected to achieve a specific standard and competency as evidenced in the learning outcomes. The competency are clustered into 3 domains. The first one is the knowledge, skills, and values. The second one is the application, and the third one is the degree of independence and responsibility. Levels and competency descriptors required for each level for basic and higher education levels. This table shows the levels and competency descriptor required for each level for basic and higher education levels. The first column contains the domain. The first domain is the knowledge, skills, and values. The second domain is the application, and the last domain is the degree of independence. And opposite to it are the competency described separately for grade 12, for baccalaureate degree, for master's degree, and for doctoral and postdoctoral degree. As you can notice, the higher the education level, the higher order thinking skills are required to reach the competency. For example, is the third domain, which is the degree of independence. For grade 12, the competency required is the ability to apply skill in varied situations with minimal supervision. For baccalaureate degree is the ability to work independently alone or in teams. And for master's degree is the ability to work independently. And for doctoral and postdoctoral degree is the ability to highly independent in work, initiate and lead and initiate others. Matching the competencies and outcomes with the PQF by doing the learning assessment. The mastery of the learning outcomes in terms of KPUP are measured in formal education starting from the basic education. In 2012, the DepEd issued Department Order Number 73, which is the K-12 grading system. The Department Order is known as the KPUP grading system. In this table, you can see in the first column the different levels from learning level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. So let us take a look on the level 1. In the description under the learning outcomes, the level 1 is the knowledge. which requires the use of factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, and metacognition. So the sample guide question is, what do you want your students to know in terms of facts, concept, procedures, and multiple thinking? For example, parts of the body, how to dissect a frog in describing a typhoon. So, on the second level, level 2, is the processes or the skills that the student use based on the facts and information for making meaning and understanding. The sample guide question is, what do you want your students to do with what they know? For example, dissect a frog and identify the different major body parts. And for the learning level number 3, the description of learning outcomes is understanding or making meaning to big ideas and concepts. The sample guide question is, what do you want your students to understand? For example, how do the elements of weather interact to produce climate change? And lastly is the learning level number 4. Under the description of learning outcomes, level 4 is the product or performance, which can be oral, visual, written, or projects are evidence of learning. So the sample guide question is, does your portfolio display evidence to show learning outcomes achieved? And what research paper can you undergo to report on the conservation of indigenous plants? The knowledge, the process, and the understanding are the learning outcomes. The 3 types of learning outcomes in different level can be achieved in many ways through the use of appropriate tools. Objective type of tests are the tests that require only one and one correct answer. It is difficult to construct but easy to check. Under the pencil and paper test is the simple recall. This is the most common tool to measure knowledge. This includes the fill in the blanks, enumeration, identification, or just the simple recall. Next is the alternative response test. This is the type of paper and pencil test where the 2 options or choices are provided. The items can be stated in a question or statement form. For example, the true or false or the yes or no. The third one is the very common multiple choice test. This is the type of test identified as the most versatile because it can measure a variety of learning outcomes consisting of a problem and a list of suggested solutions. Incomplete statement or the direct question is called the STEM, where the list of suggested solution in words, symbols, or phrases are called alternative options or choices. There should be 3 to 5 options in each item. The correct alternative is called the answer, while the remaining option or choices are called distractors, or decoys. Multiple choice tests can be presented into 2 ways. The first one is the correct answer type and the second one is the best answer type. Correct answer type has only one correct answer and the other alternatives are clearly wrong. It can be constructed in either direct question or completion of the sentence. While the best answer type is all the alternatives are correct but only one is the best, it can be constructed in either direct question or completion of the sentence. Next is the matching type test. The most common matching type test is made up of 2 parallel columns. The first column is the premise that presents the problem and the second column provides the answer. There are many modified matching types as well. Matching type tests can be presented into perfect matching type tests or imperfect matching type tests. In perfect matching type test, the number of premise in column A is less than the number of responses in column B. The response can only be used once. In imperfect matching type test, the number of premise in column A is not equal to the number of responses in column B, or the other way around. The response can be used more than once. Some of the relationships that can be matched or used in the matching type test can be found in this matrix. For example, is the person and the achievements, dates and historical events, terms and definitions, disease and its causes. We also have this subjective test. And yes, learning outcome which indicate learners' ability to originate and express idea is difficult to test through objective type tests. Hence, in this type of test, these objective test answers are done or given through reflections, insight, and opinions and can be given through essay. Under the subjective test is the essay. Essay are test items allowing students freedom of response. Students are free to select, relate, and present ideas in their own words. The type of answer would reflect the extent of the learner's knowledge of the subject matter, ability to use higher order thinking skills and express ideas in an accurate, creative, and appropriate language. We also have this restricted response item. This is like an expanded form of short answer type objective test where there is a limit on both the content scope and the form of student response. It is the most useful in measuring learning outcomes requiring the interpretation and application of data in a specific area. Another is the extended response item where the student is generally free to select any factual information that can help in organizing the response. The content of an extended essay will depend on the analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and the other higher order thinking skills of the test takers. The Level 4 of Learning Outcome and KPUP can be assessed through performance or product. These learning outcomes can be best done through the use of authentic assessment. Authentic evaluation is a type of evaluation that measures real-life task performance or actual products. The performance assessment tools are checklist, rating scale, and rubric for portfolio. Checklist is a tool that consists of qualities that are expected to be observed as present or absent. Rating scale is a tool that uses a scale in a number line as a basis to estimate the numerical value. It's easier to score if the points are in whole numbers. And the most popular rating scale is the Likert scale. Portfolio is a compilation of experiences as authentic learning outcomes presented with evidences and reflections. And to assess the total learning experiences as presented in holistic package, an assessment tool called a rubric is utilized. Level of assessment for the levels of learning outcomes. Level of assessment describe the level of learning outcomes, which is the knowledge, process, and skills, the understanding, and the product or performance. The levels of learning outcomes can also use to describe the level of assessment. In other words, the level of assessment also follows the level of thinking skill from lower to higher level. This table shows the level of assessment for the levels of learning outcomes. In the first column, we can find the three levels. For the level 1, which is the knowledge, what need to be assessed are the questions who, what, when, how, and why. The type of assessment that can be assessed is the pencil and paper or non-pencil and paper assessment, and the percentage value in assessment is 15%. On the second level, which is the process, the constructed meaning from knowledge is what being assessed. The type of assessment is similar to the first level, and the percentage value in assessment is 25%. Lastly is the level 3, which is understanding. It assesses the explanation, interpretation, application, empathy, perspective, and self-knowledge, big ideas, principle, and generalizations, and the type of assessment that can be used is pencil and paper, comprising the highest percentage value of 30%. Placing value to assessment result from KPUP to written work, performance task, and quarterly exam. While the KPUP is still utilized in the grading system, however, it has been slightly modified by the WWPTQE. A summative assessment is composed of written works, performance task, and quarterly assessment. As you can see on the table, the first component is the written work or the WW. The purpose of this is to assess the learner understanding of skill in written form and to prepare learners for quarterly assessment. This is given at the end of the topic or unit. And for the second one is the performance task. The purpose of this is to involve students in the learning process individually or in collaboration with teammates over a period of time. It also gives students opportunity to demonstrate and integrate their knowledge, understanding, and skill about topic or lesson learned in a specific real-time situation by performing and/or producing evidence of their learning. It gives students the freedom to express their learning in appropriate and diverse ways. And lastly is encourage the students' inquiry, integration of knowledge, understanding, and skill in various contexts beyond the assessment. This is given at the end of the lesson, focusing on a topic or skill lesson, and it can be also given several times during the quarter. And the last component is the quarterly assessment. The purpose of this is to synthesize all the learning skills, concepts, and values in an entire quarter. It is given once at the end of the quarter. Grades at the end of the school year and how these are computed. In the kindergarten, instead of numerical grades, checklists, anecdotal records, and portfolios are used, which are based on the kindergarten curriculum guide. In the junior high, the average of the quarter grades produced at the end of the year, the general average is computed by dividing the sum of all final grades with the total numbers of learning areas on which all of them has equal weights. For the senior high, the average of the quarterly produces the semester grade. The general average is computed by the sum of all semester final grades by the total number of learning areas. This is the senior high school grading components, and as you can notice, it is the performance task that comprise the higher percentage value, and the highest of them all is the work immersion or research. Reporting summative grades by quarter or semester or end of the year. Interpretation of the numerical values for all the subject areas is based on the minimum initial grade of 60 transmuted into an equivalent of 75 in the report card. The numerical grades are described in the different levels of proficiency in the different competencies set in the subject areas. So in advance, the grading scale based on the transmuted value must be 90% and above. In order to be proficient, the grade of student should be 85 to 89%, approaching proficiency between 80 to 84%, then developing is 75 to 79%, and for those who have grades of below up to 74% will be graded as beginning. This is my test item example for knowledge. The test example is multiple choice and enumeration. This is the example test item for process. The test type is alternative response test and the fill in the blanks. And lastly is the test item example for understanding. The test type is essay. I interviewed my former teacher, and according to him, he assessed learning through the use of pen and paper test using rubrics and performance like map reading, poster, and slogan making. This is some of his assessment tools for Araling Panlipunan 7. For the self-check, please answer the following questions. Reflect on this and answer the question, then explain why.